Can you give me, in a sentence, what is that fine balance between us destigmatizing and not creating conditions for contagion?
We must always come from a position of, what is this person trying to communicate to me about what it feels like to be them?
And then receive it as that and be able to work with that.
Yeah.
So, good late afternoon to you, Matt Hussey. You're in London.
Good morning to you. I am in London, yeah.
Thank you for joining me. I want to talk to you today about this contagion that you and I connected about last month, I think it was. And I'm riveted. But before I ask you about contagion and mental health, I want to find out about you. You're a journalist, you're an editor, you're a startup founder, photographer, content creator, and now a therapist. How'd you get into therapy?
I wanted to help other people do it. I was going to be a different type of therapist. I was going to be somebody who was willing to go down those stairs and be with them. Something about someone being very stable while you're not, in a kind of calm and kind, caring way that can help you do amazing things that you didn't think you could do. You
and I were also talking about this earlier before I clicked record, is just the importance of connection and building connections within therapy.
It's connection-based, born out of a real paradox that I see all the time, right? And that paradox is we have never been better at talking about mental health. We have never had more access to the tools and services of mental health. And yet, when you look at the levels of emotional distress in any modern industrialized society, it keeps going up. When you look at the number of antidepressants being prescribed every year, it keeps going up.
More than ever.
More than ever. I mean, you look at suicides, level of loneliness. The generation has just got into their 20s now, for the first time in recorded history, now looks at their prospects with more pessimism than the generation above them for the first time. And you go, there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with this explosion in mental health, but yet this counter explosion of rising distress. And for me, it was about the missing part of the therapy experience or the mental health experience, which is it's people, it's connection,
totally,
relationships.
And I actually wrote down, talking about mental health right now, we have more prescriptions than ever, and more mental health disorders than ever. It's not working.
It's not
what
working.
We are doing. What else can you say about mental health? We're talking about Gen Z and mental health.
They're the first generation who learned this language as part of the language that they learned about life, right? They learned about ADHD, anxiety, depression, bipolar, all these sort of terms, very popular terms, in really crucial moments. And those crucial moments tend to be from the ages of 8 to 14, right? It's when your brain explodes with self-awareness, and suddenly identifying ourselves using the language that we are taught becomes very, very important and very valuable, right? So we have a whole generation of kids who have learned this language to help them identify and explain how they feel about themselves. But the problem with that is those words and that language doesn't exist in a vacuum. It has connotations, right? It has connotations when you go and talk to a doctor. It has connotations when you go and talk to a potential employer. It has connotations when you talk to people who you want to engage in relationships with, right? Because those words are very contested and loaded and mean different things to different people. And so what's happening is we have this generation of children who, by the way, weren't doing this in the vacuum, right? The lots of schools and colleges and institutions with the best of intentions were trying to bring this stuff into schools to help children, but sadly have done the opposite, I believe, because what they were doing is they were diagnosing the normal stages of child development as abnormal and therefore a mental health problem.
Sure.
And there's a very famous study in Canada, of all places, that found that when psychiatrists were kind of like invited into schools to study the difference between boys and girls, and what happened is they looked at all the kids, and what they found is they tended to diagnose lots of kids with attention deficit disorders. And they said this is a real problem in schools, that kids are now really struggling with their attention, this kind of stuff. And then someone else looked at the data and said, well, look at when the kids were born. And the kids with the biggest attention disorders were just younger. Right? You think about an academic year, that kids can be 10, 11, 12 months difference in age.
Yeah.
And at 5 and 6, that is a massive gap in terms of development, in terms of maturity. And so I think there's been this real tragedy with this idea of diagnosing very normal human experiences with labels that change the people that receive those labels.
My perspective on that, being a teacher on a psych unit where I watched the diagnosing, number one, I saw a lot of great labels for just really bad behavior. Now, I'm not the person to diagnose, but there are some that this is a great way to justify really bad behavior. May or may not be the case. But my issue was, like, our diagnostic and statistic manual. So here in North America, we're the DSM-5. Do you also in the UK use DSM-5, or do you have a different? We do. It's becoming for diagnosing.
It's becoming the dominant way that's starting to happen.
But the thing I've been saying to anybody who's going to listen is we don't require ruling out for diagnosing. So, for example, ADHD. DSM does not require you to rule out anxiety nor childhood trauma to diagnose ADHD or anxiety. You don't have to rule out the trauma or, the inattentions. I've talked to former students that are now diagnosed with ADHD, and I say, how did your psychologist rule out anxiety? And the response is they didn't. They don't have to.
Yeah.
We are going into frightening territory.
We are.
In my lens.
That's it. And the thing about ADHD that I find so interesting that no one seems to be willing to talk about is the symptoms or the sort of the hallmarks of ADHD are also the same hallmarks of traumatic experience.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Right? Yes.
So which one is it?
I present this, and it also looks like inattention too. It can, it can. Those three components, like inattention, anxiety, trauma, can all come out the same.
And they can present in people in wildly different ways.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Someone could be so incredibly traumatized, but very high functioning at the same time.
Yeah.
And they would pass all the tests looking for these sorts of things, because they're looking for the label, not the experience.
Yeah, yeah. Don't get me going. I see it over and over again, and we're damaging. I'm not saying that they're not there. I'm not negating that those are accurate diagnoses that can happen, but they are happening a lot on a very broken foundation of a book. It's a book created by humans, and we have no scans, like you and I said earlier too, right? There's no scans to confirm that, and it's kind of a crapshoot.
It is a crapshoot, and there's a great English sort of journalist, therapist person that I see as a bit of an aspiring person I'd like to become. He wrote an incredible book about this problem, this idea called Sedated, and it's about how capitalism and mental health kind of colluded to kind of create this sort of pandemic of suffering. And he said something really interesting. He interviewed the founder of the DSM, and he was very remorseful about the work that he ended up doing.
Really?
Yeah, he was, and because he admitted in interview, and it's in his book, that what happened to the DSM and why it started has become so wildly different. It was to guide and inform practitioners rather than to be hard and fast. But one thing that he said in that interview, James Davis, I think his name is he sort of presented a really interesting way of looking at it. If you look at all illness in humans, and if you look at the progress in diagnosis, treatment, and recovery, cancer, HIV, any illness really, what you tend to find is the longer we know about it, the more time that goes into it, the better the recovery, right? So you take things like polio. We went from a thing that killed and maimed a lot of children 2 generations ago to not really being a thing, although it's coming back in strange ways. Now apply that same model with mental health, right? We have put more money, more time, more pharmacology, more experts, more clever people into this stuff. So if it's the same medical model, the way we think about mental health as we think about cancer, why are recovery rates going down?
Right.
Why are we medicating people for way too long? Right?
Good point. Yeah.
And I think, and this is the thing that doesn't really get talked about, is we want to use the medical model because mental health came from psychiatry and psychiatry came from medicine, and there's this sort of long shadow of, and if you're interested in the history of psychiatry, it emerged in a formal way in the late 19th century, and the problem it had was no one took it seriously. They thought it was a fad and a joke and stuff. So it always had this reputational problem of no one took it seriously, and when doctors got to choose their specialities, no one did psychiatry because they thought it was a joke.
Right.
So out of that comes a kind of whole industry that's trying to prove its worth and prove its value. And so it uses that medical model of authority to say we have correctly diagnosed and observed these conditions in these people. But then what happens is if you look at the DSM over time, certain things that were in one DSM doesn't turn up in another one. Homosexuality was in DSM-3 but not DSM-4. And those sorts of questions where you go, these are all constructs, not hard and fast diagnoses.
Right.
But we never tell the people that we're diagnosing that these are just ideas.
Right. It's the Bible.
It's the Bible.
The Bible.
Right?
Mm-hmm. It just struck me while you're talking, and I just got to say it. So my dad's just been through cancer, chemotherapy. He's in remission. Do you know what? There was a formula. It was a set formula. He took these medications. He did this chemotherapy. He did this. It was set. It was A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z, and you're better. And we like that. Right? If I have diabetes, I take insulin. It's a nice, compact formula. But with mental health, it is so much more than that. Like your work on connection, and that's not in a pill, but we like the pill. So when we like the pill, it's why then it's not working, because we're veering towards that. It suits our humanity, and it works like that with physical health. But the problem is it can't work like that for mental health. That's
absolutely, and I think it's starting to change. I don't know whether you've read The Myth of Normal by Gabor Maté.
It's over here. I could show it.
There
yes.
you go. Yeah. It's
I want to call him
reading.
up. Listen, he lives in my city. I wanted to go to his front door and somehow.
Yeah,
I know. Yes.
And for anyone who hasn't read the book, it really makes this case, right, that we've historically separated body and mind as two distinct entities.
Yeah.
But they are not.
Yeah.
We cannot separate them. It's impossible. And what I loved about his work is coming at it from a position of a doctor. He realised that you can treat an illness, absolutely, and you can get incredible results from treating an illness. But if you treat an illness and you treat the person, and you treat them and they enter into a relationship with you in the process, recovery rates are higher. And he looks at things like autoimmune problems, and what he found astounding was when people go to doctors and say, I have this autoimmune issue, my skin is attacking itself, or I have irritable bowel syndrome leading to Crohn's disease. No doctor asks them about what their quality of life is like.
Yeah.
What the stress levels are like, what job they do, how's their home life, and when they do, what you tend to find is people's emotional worlds changed quite radically, leading up to these diagnoses.
Right. Yeah.
And it's this thing, and I hope that's the trajectory that we're moving on, where we're finally taking down these walls, where actually you as a person is not really you as a person. It's just a kind of center of gravity for experience, relationships, history, geography, ethnicity, race, and it just gathers around you, and that is you. You're not just the outline of you, so we shouldn't treat you like you are a sealed box.
That to do so requires risk and vulnerability, and we don't like to go to risk and vulnerability, and we have to be vulnerable because now you're actually humans to humans and connecting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we got to move on because I know you have a client, so I'm watching this clock. Listen, I want to talk now about looking at destigmatization, and then I want to look to the Contagion challenge because you wrote a great article that I'm going to get to. But let's first talk. It's written here. I read it twice. Talk to me about what the power is in destigmatization, because we hear this. I don't even have to give you much data on this. We know over and over, we're talking about destigmatize. We know from suicide prevention, talking about it does not create more suicide. There's more and more dialogue about destigmatizing, and I'm working with former students of mine that are willing to say, I was depressed throughout high school, and this is what it looked like, where that wouldn't happen 20 years ago. So what is the power of destigmatizing?
Yeah. So a good way to think about destigmatization is to see it as understanding.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about an innate need of every person on this planet is to be understood in some meaningful way.
Yeah.
And the way that we seek understanding takes many, many forms. We were talking earlier about this relentless drive to do things in the two of us, right? I'd say somewhere in that mix is a desire to be understood by the world in a certain type of way. When people are able to share how they feel and share what they are or what they feel they are, and the world to say back, I understand what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
It changes the way the person looks at themselves, because when we think about the self, it's essentially three ideas. It's your relationship with you, it's your relationship with the world,
mm-hmm.
and what the world thinks about you, and your awareness of what the world thinks about you.
That's
so
good.
When we talk about stigmatization, to feel stigmatized means that how you feel about you does not align with how the world looks at you. And you feel othered, you feel different, you feel isolated. And as we know, and it's very well understood, isolation tends to kill people quite quickly.
Yep.
Chronic disease, depression, like the deaths of despair, all can be gathered under the idea of being misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
So when we destigmatize someone, what we're really saying is it's what you feel about who you are and what your experience was is okay.
Right.
Because no one else is an expert in you. You are an expert in you. And so when people come to me, or when people that you speak to, Suzanne, come to you and they say, this was what my experience was like, for you to go, I get that, or tell me more, or I had something similar. That little spark of someone else going, I get what it feels like to be you, or I have an idea of what it feels like to be you, just unlocks lots of other doors.
Totally. I want to speak for education, because this is my field, is teaching. I'm coming into almost 3 decades now of teaching, and I can say the number of students, and I also speak then with the 5.5 years with hundreds of them on a psychiatric unit, inpatient, the number of kids that have been damaged by misunderstanding from teachers. I'm sure your list goes on. And it's so important then, like one of the things I want to do is bring this to education. We have to understand, because if we understand, even if we don't experience, but have an idea of what it is to have debilitating anxiety, that's so much for me just to get to the hallway through hundreds of people to get to you, all of a sudden we're responding better, because when we know better, we respond better. And for teachers, they need that knowledge. They need to get that.
Of course. Yeah. And I think with teaching, there is always this automatic hierarchy, right?
Yep.
As a teacher and as a therapist, as anybody in a position of authority, there is this sort of baggage that comes with it, which is, if someone comes to me with a problem, the first sort of almost knee-jerk response is, I have to try and solve it, right?
Yeah.
So if a child comes to me, or a client comes to me, and they have crippling anxiety, right, the first urge would be, hey, well, let's work on it. Let's give everybody six steps, or if you do this cognitive exercise, you'll be great.
Oh, my daughter was told to go for a walk in the forest.
Right.
I'm not kidding.
Right.
I was there. Sometimes a walk in a forest is a good thing. Keep going.
So so again, that's on paper, theoretically, I'm trying to solve it. I'm trying to help. But what we miss so often, and the kind of the irony of authority is we fall into the fallacy of being the expert in the person sat in front of us, and we're not, and we never will be. And I was talking to my supervisor today about the bliss of ignorance that is this work. The more you do this work, the less you know about people,
right?
And there's a great real bliss in that, because if you accept that you don't know anything, then to learn, you have to be curious. Yes. And so if a child comes to you and say, I feel terrible, the difference between saying to them, go for a walk in a forest and tell me more about that, sounds very, very simple, but it's profound, because it does is it says to the person, what you're saying has validity. It's a valid thing that you're saying.
You wrote this great article, and honestly, I'm not just saying this to suck up. I was actually really taken at the research you did and what you put into it. And it's in your Brink news. You got a newsletter, right?
I do. Yeah.
And you write the articles, weekly article, isn't it?
I do.
Yeah. So you wrote, "Is mental illness contagion?" And the reason I was so taken by it is because I've watched firsthand contagion happening on my psych unit. For example, somebody starts hitting the wall with their fist, and guess what? They're all doing it within, no kidding, 2 days. So can you talk to me then about what contagion is and how it happens in 3 minutes or less?
Sure. So contagion, from a psychological perspective, is the idea that a symptom appears in a group or society, and at first the symptom there's a baseline of that symptom in the society group, but without observation or recognition, it kind of remains as a kind of fringe thing. What causes the contagion to suddenly spread is basically a kind of publicization of that idea. So I'll give you a few examples. So in Hong Kong, in Asia, in the 1970s and 60s and 50s, there was no such thing as anorexia. There were people who refused food, but it was not diagnosed as anorexia in the way that we understand it in the West. And then one day, a schoolgirl was walking home one day from school in a school uniform, and she was being watched by a shopkeeper on the street, and she was standing at a corner, and a bus went past, and then the girl just dropped down dead. And it caused this huge kind of scandal in Hong Kong at the time. How could a girl drop dead in the middle of the street? What had happened? The doctor sort of looked at her and saw that she'd been malnourished. But what the pathologist at the time was a English pathologist. He'd been trained in England, and so he was arrested because that was when Hong Kong was still a colony. And he said, "I know what this is. This is what we call anorexia nervosa," which was by that point was only a Western idea that had been documented in America and parts of Western Europe. And then what happened is the press started talking about anorexia nervosa, and they started looking for experts in it and talking about it. And then something strange happened. The rates of anorexia had gone from what were recorded were maybe like 10 cases a year for 20 years before then, to thousands upon thousands upon thousands.
That's shocking.
Of people.
I was shocked. That was just absolutely unbelievable to me, seeing the stats you wrote about that.
You see it everywhere, right? And so another example was bulimia, right? Another eating disorder. Rates of bulimia in England in 1980s were marginal. They didn't take up a lot of space in academic journals. It was a kind of a bit of a fringe discussion. It was considered a kind of adjacent to anorexia. And then Princess Diana came along. And the media had worked itself into a frenzy about her having an eating disorder. She denied it. And then what happened is then she finally, in an interview on TV, she admitted that she had bulimia. And then cases of bulimia skyrocketed in society, in British society. But then what happened is when Diana died, rates of bulimia started to go down.
I know. This is your article. It was shocking. So then here's the big problem, and this is the big question I have of the entire time together, is we know it is good to destigmatize mental health disorders for the reasons you discussed earlier, but how then, by talking about it, do we avoid the contagion in terms of more people doing it, more kids of mine like punching their hands against the wall, higher levels of the list? Cutting is a huge one. So I'm at a loss at how you can mitigate the contagion as we talk about it.
It is a really, really important question, and it's a really, really difficult one to answer, because I think underneath all of this is a desire to be understood. Yeah. Right? So if I said to you, we spoke at the beginning of the call, and you said, "Hi Matt, how are you?" and I just talked gibberish at you, complete incoherent babble, and you went, "I have no idea what that means. I don't feel like you've understood how I feel."
Right.
But if I use things like "I'm anxious" or "a bit depressed today," you immediately know how I feel. or have an understanding of how I might feel. So inside all of this contagion is a desire to be understood. And so we look at the example of anorexia and look at the example of bulimia in England. Inside that is an idea of like, there were lots of people who were suffering from emotional distress but did not have the language to describe it, or the language that brought with it a kind of easy way for other people to understand what was happening to them.
Okay.
So at the heart of it is a drive to be understood. But then the flip side of that is, in our need to be understood, what can happen is then people can then add their own interpretations of what we think we're telling them.
Right.
So if I said to you, I'm depressed, and I said to you, I'm taking antidepressants, you might have a judgment on that. You might think that, he's always a bit odd, or I wouldn't trust him around my kids or whatever, right? You might bring your own judgment into it. And so what happens is these words become contested, and these words start to become very fluid. And what you see, I wrote about recently the psychopaths of TikTok. Mm-hmm. So these were typically young women who had diagnoses of antisocial behaviour disorders, right? Which has become the kind of, they use the byword of psychopath because it's more alluring and it attracts more attention. They have used it to monetize their condition. And they've used it to speak to other young girls about what it feels like to be a psychopath, to have no empathy, to that sort of thing. And so these words become very fluid, and it becomes then a point of who gets to own the word, who gets to protect its meaning, and who gets to protect how you should respond to it. And so I think, how do we stop it? I think that how we stop it is by maybe not trying to apply the brakes so often. Because if you have a child that comes to you in school and they've seen this girl on TikTok and they say to you, I think I might be a psychopath, what would your response be? Would you other them? Would you push them away? Would you go, I need to escalate this because a child has told me, because my understanding of a psychopath is perhaps from movies or perhaps from kind of like old 1960s, 70s psychologically diagnosis. And so I think that the challenge we have as people who in the teaching profession or in the mental health profession is when these words are sort of released into the wild, as they have been, they take on a mind of their own, and they take on the owners that embody them. And so when they come back to us in these different forms, and working in mental health, we chuck out words all the time. If you look on the internet, you're either a narcissist or you're a what's the word? Basically, just derivatives of the idea of you being an arsehole, essentially. Right. When we use medical words and we throw them at other people, what we're really doing is using the kind of authority of medicine or mental health to denigrate and lessen the experiences of somebody else. And so that's why I come back to this idea of these words are contested, is because whoever uses them and applies them to themselves or to denigrate somebody else changes its meaning. So if I say I'm depressed, it might be because I want to be understood. If you tell me that I think you're depressed, you might be sort of trying to other me or change the hierarchy and the dynamic of power here. So my answer to the question is you can't control it, because we live in a time where language can accelerate out of psych wards and mental health therapy rooms into the wider internet at such a pace that we lose ownership of them very quickly. Could
we lessen it? Like what I'm hearing you say is, if we hold on to language and maybe not normalize it. Like there's a difference of destigmatizing and normalizing, and as soon as we normalize something, there's your contagion too.
Exactly.
Right.
And so when I have clients come to me with all kinds of like very, very articulate mental health diagnosis, they come to me and say, I am an anxious avoidant attachment style. I want to move to a secure form of attachment style. And what I do with my clients is I say, okay, I want you to tell me what it feels like to be you and not use those words. I want you just to use just the language that you use every day. I want you to tell me what it's like, but don't rely on that language.
Right. Right.
And what you find is a completely different story. And so I think these words that were designed to be helpful, this sort of shorthand for understanding, I think if we push past them and go, so if a child comes to you and says that I'm really anxious or I'm depressed or I think I'm a psychopath, asking them to tell you what it feels like to be them without using those words often reveals far more.
Right. Yeah. Matt, you have a client waiting for you, and I could talk to you all day, but I want to do quick, 3 wrap-up questions and 30 seconds or less, okay, to wrap us up. Number 1, as we conclude here, is can you give me, in a sentence, what is that fine balance between us destigmatizing and not creating conditions for contagion?
I think the balance is that we must always come from a position of what is this person trying to communicate to me about what it feels like to be them.
Okay, and then receive it as that and be able to work with that.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2 is if there's one thing you could do to change how we are talking about mental health disorders, what would it be to remove the contagion effect?
It would be to remove the idea that you were broken if you suffer.
Good. Totally. Yeah. Good. Look at you, 1 sentence or less. Okay. You and I talked a lot before about connection.
Yeah.
What would connection between human beings, if we could grow that more versus rely on pills, what would that do to potentially slow down contagion if we were connected?
I think it would not only slow contagion down, I think it would do a lot to sort of repair a lot of the social contract that we live in at the moment. We live in a really volatile time, and I think that the reason, my understanding of the reason why life has become so volatile is because we've let something come in between people.
Yep.
And that's technology.
Yep.
Because if you think about what we really see now in the world is, I'm very angry, and then the internet or an algorithm goes, here's someone else who's really angry too.
Yeah. Yep.
And what I'm going to do, push you together, and you're going to shout at each other. Because that is popular in the algorithm's eyes, right? The yardstick that it measures your engagement. If me and you shout at each other on the internet, the algorithm goes, I've done my job, I've created engagement. Take that algorithm out of that picture and go, tell me what it's like to be you, and I'll tell you what it's like to be me. And what you find is connection, when you clear out all the middlemen who are trying to monetize your feelings, what you find is, I think the world will be a far better place.
Yeah, that is good. I like that. Matt Hussey, where can people find you? I'll put it in the show notes.
You can find me on LinkedIn under my name. You can find me on Instagram under my name as well. And when I get the time, I try to do long-form YouTube videos as well. But I haven't done many recently. But
I know, I've been trying to do those.
Yeah, so hard.
Matt, thank you so much for your time. It's really nice to connect to you across the pond. 8 hours ahead as you are. Thank you. I've really, honestly, I could talk to you literally all day long.
Me too.
Okay.
Well, maybe we can make it again.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. Now, you can do your part and share this with someone who wants to learn more how to stay calm in those moments of stress. And you can click on that little link below. Subscribe to this channel for so many more videos to come about how you can get on your kids' turf. I am Dr. Suzanne Simpson. You'll find me across social media, and I will see you next time.